Previously on Ready to Die.
This was one of the first TV shows ever, and it was pure evil. During the late 1890s, a man named Dan D. Lyons created and hosted a TV show where contestants would spin a wheel that had a list of wild animals on it, and whichever one it landed on, you would be trapped in a box for 24 hours for a chance to win $1 million. But the thing was, nobody really ever won, because the animals ranged from lions, tigers, and bears, and they were always left hungry before the competition started. But there was one big. The show told the contestants that the animals were fake and just a person in a suit, so that they would feel more comfortable during the filming. But that was far from the truth. At the beginning of every episode, it would say on screen that the show was fictional, but it was in fact very real. But in the year 1899, a man named Mo DeGrasse became the first winner of the competition, surviving 24 hours with a grizzly bear. This actually made Dan upset, because he didn't want to give Mo any money. So he offered Mo a double or nothing deal. But he quickly declined and was actually very angry because he was lied to about the animals being real and was actually in serious danger. The entire time when they let Mo out, he confronted Dan and said, "I will let everyone know the truth about this show." This made Dan just as angry, and he lunged at Mo but missed and ended up falling 15 feet into the box with the grizzly bear, and this time he wasn't as friendly.
Okay, so the 1890s were like a super interesting time for music. This new piano style called ragtime was popping up everywhere, especially in these black saloons and theaters. It was like a really big deal and totally changed American music, but classical music was still around and doing its thing, even though it was starting to try out some new stuff too. Basically, the 1890s were a time of major change that led to like a huge music scene in the next century. And some of the popular songs were these really sweet waltzes like After the Ball, and then there were these songs about the city like The Sidewalks of New York. And My Wild Irish Rose was this super popular Irish song, but the coolest one was probably Maple Leaf Rag. It was one of the first ragtime songs without any singing, and it totally made waves. Okay, so like in the 1890s, a lot of writers were using their books to talk about some serious stuff like poverty, how unfair things were, and all the drama with workers. Books basically became a way to like stand up for people and try to make things better. And there was this whole thing about new women in books. Basically, it was about these female characters who weren't just sitting around waiting for guys. They were independent, smart, and had their own careers and interests outside of just being wives and moms. Also, American writers were really getting into European books, especially this thing called realism and naturalism. Plus, magazines became super popular, which was awesome for short story writers. And there were some authors who you should probably know about. I would say Stephen Crane was a big deal, writing about how tough life was in his book Maggie, about this girl in the slums, and The Red Badge of Courage, which was about this young soldier during the Civil War and his feelings. Then there was Hamlin Garland, who wrote about how hard farming life was in the Midwest in his book Main Traveled Roads. And Kate Chopin, she wrote about women's lives and their inner thoughts, especially in the South. Her book, The Story of an Hour, is all about this woman finding her own identity and freedom. And her other book, The Awakening, was kind of controversial at this time, but now everyone knows it's a really important early feminist book. So books were kind of a big deal back then for talking about real stuff and new ideas.
I'm about to blow your mind. Y'all remember these, right? The things in the Victorian era that they would use to make their butt look bigger. They're called bustles. You are never going to believe what this is based off of. If y'all haven't heard of her, her name is Saartjie Baartman. Her European name was Sarah Baartman. She was an African woman that was stolen from her country under the guise of fame and fortune, but really was sold into a circus and made to be a victim of sex slavery. At a young age, Saartjie lost her parents. Her mother unalived and her father left her. It was either that he left her or he was taken by colonizers, I'm not sure. But either way, she was orphaned. She had a husband, but then he was stolen from Africa as well. She had a baby, but her baby unalived in toddler age. At this point, she was all alone. In comes a European that promises her wealth, comfort, and even fame in a whole new world that she's never heard of before. She agrees, and as soon as she got on that ship, her freedom was gone. Her butt was like extremely large and her labia hung really low. From the research I saw, this was apparently really common in her place of living, but some other articles say that it was an illness that she had. Either way, she was extremely curvaceous. This was out of the ordinary for the Europeans. So when she got there, she was literally made to be in a circus. She was touched by whomever. Things were done to her by whomever. She was made to dance completely exposed, if you know what I mean, in front of mass amounts of people that threw things at her and screamed horrible slurs. Some were fascinated by her. Some hated her just for the fact that she was black and looked different from them. Her living conditions were so bad that she contracted an illness and unalived at 26 years old. Her whole life, she was tortured. There was even a time that her captor forced her to be completely exposed in front of a group of men, and they all tried to touch her areas, if you know what I'm saying. And from the records that I've seen, she was brutalized, if you know what I mean. She was R-worded by multiple men. Like, it was a non-stop thing for her. And to make matters worse, after she unalived, they kept her body in a museum in Paris to be a public spectacle. They didn't even give her the respect of being buried. They still treated her like she was some alien, like she was lower than life. Finally, in 2002, activists succeeded with petitioning against this inhumane and indecent exposure of her corpse. And they were able to get her body sent back to Africa and properly buried with her people. But mind y'all, this is literally all the way in 2002. She unalived in 1810. Like, can you imagine that? Now let's focus on that year that she unalived, 1810. When did the bustle come into popularity in fashion? The mid-1800s. Y'all, like, look at how big the bustle is behind. It's literally like no European naturally has a buttocks that big that I've seen. You cannot tell me that this was not based off the body of Saartjie Baartman. You cannot tell me. The woman that they kept there and tortured, brutalized until her unaliving, you made fashion out of her body. The same body that you criticized, the same body that you desecrated. Like, y'all, learning about this stuff, it's so many things about slavery that rock your world, bro. And it baffles me that it was so, like, prominent in society. How did so many people become so okay with the evil that was in front of their eyes? Anyway, y'all, as always, make sure you like and follow and comment down below what you think.
Okay, so this slide just basically breaks down the slang that was used in the 1890s, the consumer goods that were bought, and some things that people would do for entertainment. So for the slang, you have valley cooler. It's really weird. This term is a slang expression for something or someone considered admirable. Think of it as their way of saying something was really cool or fantastic. And then you have how came you so? This was a somewhat informal way of asking why you're in that state or what happened to you. It expresses surprise or concern about someone's current condition or situation. And then you have bottom fact. This phrase meant the absolute truth or the undeniable reality. It was used to emphasize the most fundamental, essential point of the matter. And then you have the consumer goods. Apparently people used to get stuff from the mail order catalogs like Sears, and they had packaged and branded goods like Heinz and Coca-Cola, and they have bicycles. That actually sounds kind of fun, like a cute way to get around. In department stores, I guess that was like their version of the mall. And then finally, entertainment. This is where it gets really entertaining or interesting. You have vaudeville. Sounds kind of fancy. You have circuses, Those are still around. I bet they were way different back then though. And then you have Wild West shows, and that's kind of cool in a historical way. You have early motion pictures, like in kinetoscopes and Nickelodeon. That must have been mind-blowing. Like moving pictures were a brand new thing. They also had theatrical performances in musical halls. It sounds like they had some fun stuff to do. It's just so weird to think about life being so different back then. The cell phones, the internet, it's a whole different world.
For America, that day arrives on May 9th, 1893. Following decades of a booming railroad market, the industry, plagued by overexpansion and overbuilding, suddenly collapses. The result is one of the worst depressions in history, the Panic of 1893. The president, Grover Cleveland, is determined to maintain the gold standard and refuses to engage in expansionary fiscal policies such as tax cuts and increased government spending.
Back then, the US dollar was not the main global currency. The British pound was. President Cleveland felt that to maintain the credibility of the US government, he must maintain the convertibility of dollars to gold.